Good morning, Living Stones. I've never been here before. I was at Eagle Rock this morning, the church that I pastor, first service. One of my associates was preaching, and I heard him preach, and I thought, well, Living Stones, I know it's right in the area. It's probably not going to take me very long to get there, and it took me a little longer to get here, but here I am. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Pastor John, and for everybody online, welcome. Glad you're here. A couple of churches ago, I had a little guy in my church named Doug. Doug, he's probably right around 80 years old, and he was baptized after a series of meetings and started coming to church, and I don't know where he was in his mind, but he was often at the church and he would wander around. And as Doug would wander around, he would follow me around. And I would, hi Doug, how are you? Hi Pastor. And then he'd ask me some questions. The questions never quite made sense to me, but he always had questions. And they were never questions you could answer. You know those kinds of questions? I don't think he was even looking for answers. He just wanted to ask questions. And so he would follow me around, ask questions, and after a while, and I'm going to admit this freely as a pastor, as a minister of the gospel, I was not looking forward to seeing Doug, because he was always there. And he was always asking me questions that could never be answered. And so sometimes if I knew Doug was over here in church, I would make sure I was kind of over here, and I would take different ways to my office so that he didn't see where I was. And I was kind of avoiding Doug. I know I shouldn't be doing that, but that's what I was doing. And so one day, I knew that Doug was there, and I went a back way to my office, and I got in my office, and I was just tired, and I was a little bit cranky. And I had the curtain pulled on my window, and I heard on the door, oh no, it's Doug. Pastor, are you in there? I had a little couch in my office, and I was tired, and I laid down, and I didn't answer. I know you're thinking, bad pastor, aren't you? And then I fell asleep. I woke up 20 minutes later feeling a little refreshed. And I got my things, and I opened the door. There's Doug standing right there at my door. And I was exasperated, and I said, Doug, yes, Pastor. What do you want? And he said, I don't rightfully know. I don't know. Simple question. What do you want? I don't know. At some point, humanity, the prophets, somebody ask God, what do you want? What would you like from me? And he gave us an answer. He gave us a really, really interesting, good answer. In Micah chapter 6, verse 8, he says, here's what I want from you. I've shown you, oh man, what is good. And what I desire, this is what I want, what the Lord desires of thee. To, remember? Do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I want those three things, to do justice. Often, as Christians, because we have a heightened sense of justice and right and wrong, we feel like justice is something that's served in a courtroom. Often we think that justice is when somebody gets what they deserve, right? You get caught speeding and you get a ticket, well, you deserved it. That's justice, right? If we see some sort of evil playing out in the world and somebody goes to jail and we're glad, that's justice. Or we see corporate greed and somebody gets busted and they've been stealing money for a long time and they get what's coming to them, that's justice. In the Bible, that's not what justice is. In the Bible, justice is when you see something wrong and you do something about it. You make the wrong thing right. That's what justice is in the Bible. In the Old Testament specifically, the prophets talked about this all the time. Justice is when you see something wrong and you make it right. I was in Santa Rosa, California, and I was driving down the highway, and I was looking for the Men's Warehouse in Santa Rosa, California. I got a $50 gift certificate to the Men's Warehouse in Santa Rosa, California. Somebody gave it to me, and I was very excited to get something like maybe some shirts or a new pair of pants or something like that. Turns out the only thing you can buy for $50 in Men's Warehouse is socks, so I bought some socks. But I didn't know where it was, and my internet, or my phone wasn't being receptive, and so I was pulling off of an exit, and it was like 105 degrees that day. It was really warm, and I pulled off, and I parked my car, and I'm trying to get some sort of reception on my phone to find out where the Men's Warehouse is. And as I'm sitting there, and the air conditioning's running, I hear flap, 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 and I look in my rearview mirror and I see this car come by me and they pull right in front of me, maybe, 20 paces in front of me, and I see that they have a severely flat tire. Well, I like watching people react. I like watching people, and let's see how this goes. And I look, and this young woman looked to be maybe in her middle 20s, early 20s, gets out of the car, and different ethnicity than I am, and she pulls out of the car. She's wearing a thin tank top and some shorts, and then the other door opens, and I see a girl that looks maybe 17 get out of that side of the car, and they go and they open the trunk, and I watch. The trunk is filled up with clothing. And they start taking clothing out and putting it on the side on the pavement, on the hot pavement, until they get down to what some would describe as a spare tire. I would describe as a hazard. They pull this spare tire out, and I can see from my car, this tire should not be on a vehicle. And they put it beside the car, and then they get their jack and everything out, and they're looking at it, and they're shrugging their shoulders, and finally I feel like, okay, I need to help. So I get out of the car, I slam the door, and when I do, they look up, and they see me walking toward them. And the younger girl runs around to the other side of the car and gets in the car. And this other lady looks at me, and she looks with suspicion, and I said, looks like you guys have a flat tire. Looks like maybe you don't know how to change it. Would you like me to change your tire for you? And she goes, well, I don't know. I mean, you don't have, why are you helping us? And I said, I can do it. I know how to change a tire. I'm glad to help. Well, okay. And so she kind of steps back away from me, and I go over and I get the jack assembled, and I put the car up, and I take the flat off. The flat is not just a flat tire. This tire is shredded. It'll never be used again. And so I get her spare, and I look at it, and it's bald, and there's some things coming through that too. It's not going to last for 50 miles. But it's holding air at the moment, and so I put it on, and I said, listen, this tire, it's not going to last very long, and you're just going to go through this again, but you're not going to have a spare. You really need to get a new tire. Okay, I know somebody. And I looked around at her other tires, and I said, well, your other tires are pretty bad too. I know, mister, I know. We can't afford anything. So, okay. I said, listen, if you don't mind, I'm going to follow you to where you're going to buy this other tire, because this tire is so bad, I don't want you to get hurt. Mister, we'll be okay. And she looks in at the other girl, and the girl in the car looks at her and goes, and I said, please, I promise I'm safe. Just let me follow you. Well, okay, it's not too far. So I follow her into a part of Santa Rosa that I'd never been in before, a part that I'd never driven through before. And she pulls down this little dirt road, and I pull down it, and at the end of this road is like this makeshift barn, and there's a whole bunch of old tires in this barn, and this old codger comes walking out, and I put my window down, and I'm listening, and he's going back and forth to her to give her this used tire. The used tire was about as bad as the spare tire, and he's wanting to charge her $40 for this tire. And all of a sudden, Holy Spirit, psst, you need to do something about this. And so I get on the phone, I have better reception, and I called the other Holy Spirit, my wife, and said, listen, here's the situation. And I explained the situation. I said, can we buy these people some new tires? And she said, well, we don't have that kind of money. I said, I'll put it on a credit card and we can pay it off. And she goes, oh boy, because we have credit cards, but we never put anything on it. We don't have credit card debt. We don't like that. And so we're kind of against it. Even in emergencies, we'll try to do something else. But she said, you know, if God's telling you to do it, do it. I said, I think he is. And she goes, okay. And I hung up. She hung up. I get out of the car. I walk toward this gentleman and this lady. She's almost yelling at him now, trying to get the price down. And they both look at me. And I looked at her and I said, listen, don't buy a tire from this guy. And he goes, what you talking about? And I said, listen, step back. You know, don't buy a tire from this guy. Can I talk to you privately? And she goes, okay. And so we go over and I said, listen. And now we're by the car. Her young friend is in the passenger seat. And I said, do you trust me? And she looks at me and she looks at the girl, and the girl went. I said, I'm asking you to trust me. If you'll just follow me to a place, I think I know where you can get a better tire. And she said, well, okay, mister, okay. So she gets in her car. The guy was angry, but I didn't care. And she follows me, and I take her to Discount Tires. You know, America's Tire, I don't remember what it is in California, but it's the same branch, right? And that's where I get all my tires for my cars. And I said, we got in the parking lot, and I said, just wait here. She goes, what are you doing? I said, just wait here. Just wait here. And so I go in, and I explain the situation to the boys behind the counter. And I said, I want to get tires. How much is it going to cost? And he told me. And I said, is there any way I can get a discount? I mean, this is charity work I'm doing here, you know. And I thought, I'm a pastor. And yeah, he didn't care. He goes, no, tires cost what tires cost. And I said, okay, fine. I said, she needs 5 tires. She needs a good spare. And he goes, yeah, we can arrange that. And so I go out, and I wave them in, and lo and behold, they have a baby that I don't think can walk yet in the back seat in this hot weather. I don't think they had air conditioning. And they all come in, and they sit down. And I'm going to call this, I'll call this lady Jane for these purposes. And I said, Jane, can you come over here? And she came over. And I said, Jane, I'm going to buy you a new set of tires for your car so that you can have tires all around and a new spare. And she goes, why would you do that? And I said, honestly, Jane, I just believe that that's what Jesus would do. And so I feel kind of compelled to do it. I can afford it. Let me get you a set of tires. And all of a sudden that change from distrust and everything turns into tears, and she runs at me, jumps up in the air, throws her arms around my shoulders and her legs around my waist. It was incredibly uncomfortable. And she started screaming, you're an angel, you're an angel, you're an angel. And I said, Jane, it's okay. And I pried her off of me, and I said, it's really okay. She flew back into my arms again. You're an angel, you're an angel. And I said, no. I just happened to be somewhere. I saw you had a flat tire. That's all this is. And so they start working on her car, and I sit down next to Jane and this little girl, this 17, 18-year-old. I said, tell me your story. Oh. Both of them had been in relationships that ended in physical and mental abuse, and they'd both been in and out of trouble, and they found each other, these two young women, and decided to kind of live their life together. And I wasn't sitting there as judge and jury. I was just there listening. And she said, we don't have an apartment. We've been living in our car. That's why our clothes were all in the back. And we're getting into an apartment tomorrow, though. We got an apartment because I got a job. I got me a job at Safeway. I'm working at the Delicatessen, and it's going to be so good. And I can make some money so I can afford that apartment. And she was excited about that. And pretty soon the tires were on and the car came around, and she thanked me again. I said, Jane, I get over to Santa Rosa. I used to be the PUC pastor up there. I get over to Santa Rosa every once in a while. Can I just stop in the deli and say hi? And she goes, I'll give you free potato salad. I said, okay, I'll take that. I like potato salad. Jesus said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do justice. I want you to do justice. I don't want you to think justice. I don't want you to agree with justice. I don't want you to, in principle, I think that justice is a really good idea. Jesus said, no, I want my people to do justice. That's when you see something's wrong in the world, and within your capabilities of how God has blessed you, you make the wrong thing right. That's doing justice. We need to do justice. I'm going to go out on a limb here, a theological limb. Maybe you'll never invite me back after I say this. People don't care what you believe. They care what you do. And then when you do justice, they're going to want to know what you believe. Right? What does Ministry of Healing say? What does what's Christ's method for winning people? What did he do? He did justice. He mingled with men, and he healed their needs. He made wrong things right. And then he said, hey, come follow me. Right? So to do justice, what's the second one? Love mercy. Well, we do love mercy when we're being shown it, but sometimes it's hard for us to extend it. To love mercy. I worked at an academy in North Carolina. Actually, next weekend I'm speaking for their alumni weekend at Mount Pisgah Academy in North Carolina. And while we were there, I don't know if you've ever worked in a school situation, but in school situations, in every school that I've ever been in, you have a bunch of teachers that really like young people, and for some odd reason, there's 2 or 3 of them that just don't seem to ever like young people. But they're there, and they're teachers, and they're on the staff, and it's just, you scratch your head because you think, if you can give somebody a B or an F, they're just always going to give an F. It's just, I don't know why we got some of those teachers around. And there was this one guy, he was the head of our cafeteria, actually. And he was just always really gruff. He was gruff around the students. He was gruff with other people. And he just kind of had one of those demeanors that came across as judgmental, maybe a little bit. And every time we were in staff meeting, we would have discipline issues that we would always vote. He would always vote the most severe for the kid. If it was like maybe suspend him for a week or kick him out, no, you can't. We can't tolerate that behavior. You got to kick that kid out and show everybody a lesson. That kind of a thing. His name was Richard. Well, Richard was on duty one night. If you know anything about boarding academies, the kids are always on campus, and at night you have recreation, and during rec, you have different faculty members that are on duty. And our job when we were on duty was to walk around, make sure the kids were doing the things they were supposed to be doing and not doing the things they weren't not supposed to be doing. And so it was, the rec was in the gym that night, and everybody was in there playing basketball and laughing and talking and, sitting on the stage, and everybody was having a great time. And Richard and I were on duty, and a few other faculty, and Richard decided to circle around the gym on the outside of the gym. See if any kids were out there doing. So he goes out of the gym, and he walks past the windows and around the corner, and he looks and he sees something in the dark corner in a recess there in the building, and he goes over and looks, and there in the recess of the building, in the dark, are Jonathan and Sarah. And they are embracing vigorously. They're kissing and hugging, and he walks up and goes, and they go, and of all the faculty members, they're going to catch you doing these things. This is the last one that you want. And they realized it right away. And Jonathan said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. W. She's really sad, and I was consoling her." And Mr. W. said, why don't you guys go to the dorms? We have faculty meeting tonight. We'll deal with it then. Now, typically what happens on these campuses, if you are doing these kinds of things, you get put on what's called social, right? Which means for a week, you're not allowed to contact each other at all. By phone, you're not allowed to sit next to each other. You just got to be completely separated for a week, right? It's like, spraying cold water on them and separate them. And so that's all that was going to happen. But Jonathan kept arguing. Why do you have to be so mean to everybody all the time? And Mr. Wright, is getting red in the face, but he said, just go to your dorms. We'll take care of it later. What? I don't know why you always have to be ordering everybody around. And just go to your dorms. Well, the kid loses it, and he starts using foul language and starts swearing and cussing and yelling at Mr. W. Now a crowd is gathering around. And this kid is red in the face, and he's pointing his finger, and he's describing Mr. W's mother and their heritage, and he's just going into every insult that he can possibly go into. And now it's an event. Kids are around, faculty around, everybody knows what's going on. Jonathan is out of here, right? We get the faculty meeting that night, sitting around the table, the principal, Mr. Nafee, he looks up, supposed to start with worship, but there's some tension in the room. Mr. W is still, and he looks at Mr. W and says, "Richard, how was your night on supervision?" Because everybody heard. "Well, it was a rough one, Mr. Nafee. It was a rough one. It was a rough one for sure, yeah. He says, "Okay, well, we had a little worship, and then we got right to it. What are we going to do with Jonathan?" Well, everybody knew that he had publicly cussed out one of the teachers, nearly looking like he was going to hit him. And you can't do that on an Adventist school board in an academy camp. You can't do that. You're gone, right? And so Mr. Ratzliff, I move that we send Jonathan home. He lives down in Florida, so somebody's going to have to drive him down there. And somebody else. Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? And before any of us raised our hands, we heard, "Wait." Wait. We looked up, and it's Mr. W. And I had never seen this before. He was crying. And he said, "Please don't vote yet." His lip was quivering. He had some jowls. His jowls were quivering. Please don't vote yet. Jonathan used to work for me in the cafeteria. And I thought we had a really nice relationship. He said, "I don't want to see Jonathan go home. Can I suggest another method of discipline?" And everybody's all ears, because this guy, if we thought if there was a death penalty involved, he would have voted for the death penalty. And then Mr. Nafee says, what would you like to suggest? And he said, Jonathan and I have a relationship, and it's a broken relationship. He said, instead of kicking him out, and I know that's what he deserves, and if we vote that, then I guess that's what we vote. But instead of kicking him out, and he's crying more now, and his wife's sitting next to him and crying, he said, I would vote that we suspend Jonathan for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's a long suspension. And we're going to send him home to Florida for 2 weeks and then back up to North Carolina? No. I don't want to send him home. I vote we suspend him for 2 weeks and he comes and live with me and Sandy in our house so that we can repair our relationship. Can we do that? Well, now everybody's crying because Mr. W is crying and suggesting this, and we all vote aye, you know. They bring Jonathan in. He knows he's kicked out. And they tell him what Mr. Wright has suggested. And Mr. W suggested, and Jonathan starts crying. He says, you did that for me? I feel like we need to repair our relationship. Mercy. He deserved to be kicked out. That boy deserved to be kicked so hard that he landed in Florida. But sometimes mercy is better. We're supposed to love mercy. Like love it. Right? One time Jesus was teaching Sabbath school in the temple area. There was a big ruckus. People started partying, and as they were partying, Jesus looked down, and somebody was being dragged violently toward him. They throw this young woman down, and they say, she committed adultery. The Bible says she's to be stoned to death. Jesus, what do you say? I mean, they're not wrong. That's what the Bible says. And it doesn't say unless you feel sorry for her. It just says she's dead. It's written. And what's Jesus going to do? Because you can't argue with the Bible. It's right there in the Word of God. But Jesus knows Micah 6:8. And in the end, what does he do? He kneels down, starts drawing in the sand. I love it when God draws in the sand, when he plays in the dirt. Isn't it great when God plays in the dirt? I mean, first time he does it, what does he do? He molds a human being and he makes a man. Second time I know of that he plays in the dirt, he carves his character into some tablets of stone and says, here, do this. It's a lot like me. And now he's drawing in the dirt. In an act of mercy, these men who have rocks in their hands and bloodshot eyes, they're ready to take this woman's life. Jesus is drawing in the dirt. Hey, Caleb, you were with her last Tuesday. We don't know what he was writing, but I'd like to imagine it's this. Josiah, you got her in this business in the first place. And one by one, as he was writing in the sand, people started dropping their rocks. And they all go away, and Jesus takes this woman. I'm a visual person. I like to that he takes her chin, lifts it up, and she's laying on the ground, and he's down at her level. And he says, hey, nobody's here to accuse you anymore. I'm not going to condemn you. Then there's those famous words that preachers abuse all the time, go and sin no more. I'm pretty sure she sinned after that, but I'm also pretty sure she wasn't in the business after that she was in. And Bible scholars think that this woman became a very ardent follower of Jesus. Maybe one of the witnesses of his resurrection that were the first evangelists to tell the disciples that Jesus had rose from the dead. Why is that? Why did this all happen to her? Because Jesus loved mercy. He loved mercy. And he loves mercy for you too. Loves mercy for you. So, God, what do you want us to do? What do you want from us? I want you to do justice, to love mercy. And then this last one's interesting, to walk humbly with your God, to walk humbly with your God. I've been on a couple of walks. I'm going to tell you about two of them. First walk. I was 19 years old. I was down in the basement of my dad and stepmother's house. I was doing laundry, and I was down there just messing around, waiting for my laundry to get done. And I heard, "Ah!" And I went, "Oh no." My dad and my stepmom were, they fought a lot. Usually didn't get too physical, but this time it did. I ran up the stairs and I looked down the hallway, and my dad was standing outside their bedroom door, and he was going, "Oh! Oh!" And I ran. I said, "Dad, what happened?" And she had turned around, and she was so angry at him, she went like this and hit him right in the eye sockets. Two fists, just bam, right in the eye sockets. And he looked like a raccoon after a while, just black eyes in both. She really hit him hard. And she slammed the door and locked it, and he was going, "Ah!" And he looks at me, and in rage, my dad said, "I'm gonna kill her." And he turned around, and with the heels of his hands, he went, bam, and the door came flying off the hinges, and he started in after my stepmom. I ran in after him. Now, my dad, I was adopted. My dad was 5'8", 170 pounds, and at 19 years old, I was 6'6", probably 230 pounds, and so I ran in after him as he was going to harm this woman, and I grabbed him in the middle of the waist, and I picked him up, and I backed out of the room and down the hallway while he was fighting and thrashing, and I finally got him into the living room, and I threw him on the couch. And he said, "Leave me alone." And he kept getting up, and I kept pushing him down. And he kept getting up, and I kept pushing him down. And finally, thank goodness, because he was a smoker, he ran out of breath. And I said, "Dad, you can't go in that room." He said, "Oh, I'm going to go in there." I said, "Dad, you can't go in that room." He says, "What do you want me to do?" And I don't know why I said it. I don't know where it came from, because my dad and I had never done this in our history. I said, "Let's go for a walk." And he said, yeah, let's go walking. So I grabbed him and take him down the stairs. We put a couple of jackets on, and we went outside, and we started walking very vigorously at first while he was smoking a cigarette as fast as he could. And then after a while, he started to run out of breath, and we started walking slower. And he started to calm down. And he and I started to talk. And my dad and my dad, I think he loved me. Never said it, but I think he loved me. And we were okay, right? But on this walk, as he calmed down and I was walking next to him, and we were going along, we started talking about some deep things. Life things. Stuff that he'd never talked to me about before, and stuff that I'd never told him before. And we just kept walking, talking and sharing. And by close to the end of that walk, my dad told me that he loved me for the very first time in my life. Very first time in my life, my dad said, "Mark, I love you." And I didn't even know what to do with it. I just went, "Thanks, Dad." But I remember it. And I remember when he said it, how much I felt like I needed it. It was during that walk that I got that confession from him. And that walk calmed him down from the stresses of the day. And by the time we got back to the house, things were okay. Ish. That's the first walk. Second walk. told you I lived in North Carolina. My son was raised there until he was 4 years old, and we moved back to Washington State. When he was just a little guy, he started walking at 10 months, and he would just, at 10 months, he was running everywhere. I'm like, man, that was too early. But he was running everywhere, and we lived, it was rural North Carolina, so we lived kind of on the side of this hill at this academy on the campus, and there were trails that would go back there. We had this big Ridgeback hound, this dog, and we had a couple of cats, and every day, my son and I would go for a walk. And he didn't walk, he ran everywhere, right? But I got these big old long legs, and so I just, walk along, and he'd be running here and there and doing that. Son, that's poison ivy, don't touch that. Oh, okay, and I think he was probably 2 years old, 2.5 years old. And walking, every day we would walk. Every day I would take time out of to go on a walk. And the dog and the 2 cats would come with us and walk, I don't know, a couple of miles up this trail and back sometimes. And walk and walk and walk. One day, we got back from our walk, and we had a tiered yard. And we would come back, and sometimes I would sit down, and on one of these tiers there was a big sandbox that he would play with. And so we got back, and I sat down, and I was kind of tired from the walk and chasing him around, and I'm watching him play in the sand. And all of a sudden he stops, just a little tyke, just a little guy. And he comes over to me, and he's got dirty hands, and he grabs my face like this. And he gets really, really close. And he goes, "Dad?" I said, "Yes, son. I love going for walks with you." And I said, "I love going for walks with you too, son." And he gives me a hug, and he goes back to playing. When Jesus says, "I want my people to walk humbly with their God," I think that's what he's talking about. You take a walk to just shed the problems of the world. You take a walk to be intimate with the person that you're walking with. Maybe holding hands while you walk. Stop and look at each other. Right? You take a walk because you just love walking with the person you're walking with. Like me and my boy. He's 27 years old now. He's not much interested in walking around with me anymore. But he loved walking with his dad. Don't you love that old hymn? And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. When Jesus says, "I want my people to walk humbly with their God," that's what he's talking about. The intimacy of a lifelong walk with our Savior. So if we were to ask God, "What do you want? What do you want me to do?" That's his answer. It's right there in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. I want you to do justice. When you see things are wrong, make them right. If it's something that you can help, you need to help. I want you to love mercy. Stop condemning. Stop judging. Love mercy. It's more redemptive. In your families, in the workplace, in society, love mercy. And the last thing I want you to do, it's just a list of 3 things, children. It's just a list of 3 things. I want you to walk humbly with me. Let that change your heart. Let me whisper, "I love you." Let me give you my embrace. Let's hold hands while we walk. Let's take our time. Let's stop and smell some flowers. But just walk with me. I think if we do these three things, we're gold. Right? We do these three things, we've got eternity. We do these three things, and this world becomes a little bit more beautiful because we're doing these three things. So do I have a benediction I'm supposed to do right now? Do you play something and sing something and then I do a benediction? Oh, you're going to do a benediction. I don't know how things work. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk with you about one of my favorite Bible verses. And I hope we get to see each other again.